On this Tuesday night in Gaza, the dead go uncounted. Hospitals caught in the crossfire, now digging mass graves.
The situation, in fact, is getting worse and worse.
Those who have escaped Gaza and made it back to Canada.
Both of us, Israeli people and Palestinian people, they like to live in peace.
Plus, Canadian peace activist Vivian Silver's final message to friends as Hamas gunmen stormed her home. Arrested, the action UK police are taking after a pro hockey player died from a slash to the neck. Plus, flying off into the sunset, the Prime Minister's aging plane finally retires.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We are following events in Gaza tonight. For the first time, the Israeli Defense Forces confirm they have moved into Gaza's largest hospital, which is filled with hundreds of patients and staff, including babies. In a statement, the IDF said tonight it is conducting what it calls a precise and targeted operation in a specific area of the hospital. It didn't specify where. It says the intent is that no harm is caused to civilians it says are being used by Hamas as human shields. Israel has maintained Hamas has its command and control center beneath Al-Shifa hospital, something doctors and staff say they know nothing about. Today, Doctors Without Borders, which has staff at that hospital, said thousands of civilians, medical staff and patients are trapped in hospitals and other locations under fire in Gaza City. They must be protected and afforded safe passage if they wish to leave. Also today, for the first time, Pentagon and White House officials said the U.S. has intelligence that shows Hamas uses hospitals in Gaza, including the Al-Shifa hospital, to conceal and support their military operations.
We do have information that Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad uses some hospitals in the Gaza Strip, including the Al-Shifa hospital, as a way to conceal and support their military operations and hold hostages.
Right now, the living cannot escape that hospital, and there is nowhere to bury the dead. There are reports mass graves are being dug outside Gaza's largest hospital. Again, a warning, some of the pictures in our stories are disturbing. Daniele Hamamdjian begins our coverage tonight.
The first rainfall in Gaza since the war began. It doesn't take much to make the children smile. But everybody else knows what the start of the rainy season can mean. The prospect of flooding would almost certainly overwhelm the sewage system and disease would spread. This on top of 39 days of airstrikes and counting. In hospitals that are still functioning, the flow of incoming patients is incessant.
Water now is a very challenging, thing. It used to be in such, emergency situation, 15 liters per day per person. The available water now is 1 to 3 liters per person per day. And most of that water is not really suitable for drinking or for cooking.
Israeli forces claim Hamas has lost control over Gaza City. They say the group's command center is located under the largest hospital in the enclave. The morgue at Al-Shifa hospital no longer works. The bodies, more than 120, are piling up. On Tuesday, the civilians trapped in the hospital complex are said to have dug a mass grave within the grounds of the compound.
A very bad smell there, and we are sure all kinds of infections and diseases will be transmitted from that one. Today we had a little bit of rainy weather in the morning, and then the smell was really horrible. No one could even open a window or just walk around within the corridors with this very bad smell.
Israel has urged civilians in the north to flee south, where it's not much safer. Suleiman Abu al-Saud in Khan Yunis, who is deaf, describes how his house was bombed. 7 of his children were with him in the room.
There are fears in some parts of the Arab world that Israel is trying to drive Palestinians out of Gaza. Fears that are amplified when far-right members of Benjamin Netanyahu's government make comments such as this one, that Israel will no longer be able to accept the existence of Gaza as an independent entity, and that Palestinians should agree to voluntarily immigrate to other countries. That was a quote from the Israeli finance minister. Donna.
Danielle in Jerusalem, thanks. An Israeli-Canadian woman is now known to have died in the October 7th attacks by Hamas. It was thought that Vivian Silver was taken hostage, but forensics confirmed she was killed inside her home. Today, Global News spoke to some of those closest to her about how, even in her final moments, she was focused on peace. Mike Armstrong reports.
Just 3 days before the October 7th attacks, Vivian Silver was at an event in the West Bank held by a group she helped found. But a lifetime spent in the pursuit of peace was ended by the violence she was trying to prevent.
It's absurd. It's absurd that she was taken and she was murdered.
Yael Braude worked for years alongside Silver at Women Wage Peace. On the morning of the attacks, as Hamas gunmen entered Kibbutz Be'eri, Silver was hiding in her home, but with her phone. Now, this is another kibbutz, but it's exactly what was going on in Be'eri. While it was happening, Silver was updating friends, including Braude. Silver could hear gunfire and at some points, people in her house.
She told us it's very scary, but it's okay, and that it's helping me to be with you on WhatsApp, and she had a wonderful sense of humor. So she was laughing a little bit about it. But,
even in the middle of that.
Yes.
Now, with gunmen moving around the kibbutz in between texts, Silver took a call from an Israeli radio station, a host who knew her and knew how close she lived to Gaza, just a few kilometers. It appears to be her last conversation.
She was sitting in her safe room. She told us that she was sitting on the floor, probably hiding.
ואת אומרת שאת שומעת, יש קולות של ירי, של נשק קל בחוץ, או ש...
כן, אתם לא שומעים את זה מפה, אבל אני שומעת אותו היטב דרך החדר הסגור.
Now, there was hope after Silver disappeared that she was still alive, that like some of her neighbors in this video, she was taken hostage. But when investigators went through Kibbutz Be'eri and what was left in the burnt-out homes, they found something in Silver's safe room. Not much, but enough to confirm it through DNA.
There is no body. The remains are burnt. It's ashes.
איך קוראים לך?
Vivian, אני מקיבוץ בארי.
What is left now are memories of a mother. Silver had 2 sons, and a grandmother. She had 4 grandchildren and a 5th on the way. But for her friends, she has also left inspiration. In that radio interview, even with bullets and rockets ringing out, she told the host she still wanted to talk about peace. It's time, she said. And then she told the host they'd talk about it again when everything was over. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Tel Aviv.
Optimism is in short supply in the region right now, though today the American president said the families of the more than 200 hostages held by Hamas should be patient.
I've been talking with the people involved every single day. I believe it's going to happen, but I don't want to get into detail.
What's your message for the families?
Hang in there, we're coming.
Today, tens of thousands of people gathered on the National Mall in Washington to demand the release of those hostages and to show solidarity with Israel. As Jackson Proskow reports, people came from across the country and from Canada.
With heavy security from police and the National Guard, tens of thousands marched for Israel.
I'm here to support everybody I love.
There is raw anger over the October 7th attack.
38 days!
And deep fear about what will happen to hundreds of hostages held by Hamas, including Orna Nutra's son, Omer.
We all must use the power that we have to help bring Omer and all of the hostages home now!
The march was also meant to send a defiant message about rising anti-Semitism, with incidents up more than 300% in the U.S. this year, according to the Anti-Defamation League.
Jews right now are experiencing unprecedented levels of anti-Semitism and hatred against Jews. It is really, really scary.
Fear has spread across the border. Ruthie Wall is more than one of 2,000 Jewish Canadians who made the journey to be here.
We're not going to stand for anti-Semitism in Canada or in the U.S. or around the world.
Down the state of Israel!
Not everyone is united. The civilian toll of Israel's military campaign in Gaza has deepened division over whether it's time for a ceasefire.
Obviously, they're killing a lot of innocent Palestinian civilians, but they're also hurting Israel.
We're at war. Our people have been attacked brutally.
But in official Washington, support for Israel remains steadfast.
Thank you, everybody!
Clear to the audience of thousands is that there's no question aid will continue to flow to one of America's closest allies.
The United States has always stood with Israel, and we will do everything to see that that never, ever changes.
Jackson Proskow, Global News, Washington.
A Salmonella outbreak in Canada has been linked to raw dog food. It's very young children who are getting sick. Heather Yorick-West explains what parents need to know.
It's believed to help dogs with digestive issues, but your pet's raw food diet could make your kids sick.
This is pet food that has produced from raw animal protein, so it hasn't been cooked.
According to the Public Health Agency of Canada, an outbreak of Salmonella infections linked to raw pet food and contact with cattle has made dozens of people ill. Across Canada, 40 cases have been identified across 6 provinces, the majority in Quebec and Ontario.
And the most susceptible population for Salmonella infection is obviously infants, below 5 years old.
That's because Health Canada does not test, approve, or regulate pet food in this country. Problem is, if a pet becomes infected with Salmonella from contaminated food, it can easily pass the bacterial infection on to its owners.
If people interact with those animals, they can become sick.
Health Canada says more than 40% of those sick in this outbreak are under the age of 5. So far, 13 patients have been hospitalized. The strain of Salmonella highly resistant to antibiotics.
Essentially what happens is when you go to hospital, all they can do is basically rehydrate you rather than give you any drugs, and it can be a painful experience to watch, especially if you're a parent.
Health officials say people should not feed their pets raw food, especially when there are small children in the home. Heather Yorick-West, Global News, Calgary.
There's another sign of the pain the rising cost of living is causing. Toronto's annual Who's Hungry report reveals 1 in 10 people now rely on food banks, twice as many as the year before. As Eric Sorensen explains, food banks say they're at their breaking point.
Bridget Martin is a volunteer, but also a client of the North York Harvest Food Bank. 15 years ago, she was injured on the job. Her benefits were eventually cut off, and food banks saved her.
My income was not enough. My rent was far too high. And still with the food bank and still without the food bank, I could not have survived that time.
What's different today is the magnitude of the need. More than $10 million worth of food will likely go through this facility alone this year. Toronto has seen a 51% increase in food bank visits, the highest ever. More than 2.5 million visits so far this year, and that number is expected to exceed 3 million visits by the end of 2023. Another difference, many food bank clients today have jobs, but earn too little to keep up with the rising cost of food and housing.
It's unacceptable that 1 in 4 food bank clients spend 100% of their income on housing, leaving nothing for food, clothing, or transportation.
All levels of government have to do more, starting with the federal government and the Canada Disability Benefit. 35% of all food bank users have a disability.
The food bank wants to see long-awaited federal disability benefits actually delivered by 2025. It wants the province's plan to build 1.5 million new homes to include 300,000 affordable units. And it wants City Hall's plan to reduce poverty to have funding attached.
There is plenty of failure from our institutions, from our leaders, as I said, at all levels and across the ideological spectrum that have driven us to where we are today.
We want to belong somewhere. We don't want to be discarded and say...
For Bridget Martin and so many more, long-term solutions include incomes that keep up with the cost of living. But the immediate fix for many comes down to food banks, which need support from governments, private sector, and public donations more than ever before. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
Coming up, an arrest in the death of a former NHL player in the UK. Police in England have arrested a hockey player on suspicion of manslaughter after the death of another player, American Adam Johnson. His neck was cut by a skate in the middle of a game in Sheffield, England. The player has not been charged yet. Redmond Shannon explains what's behind his arrest and what might be the next steps.
Sunday saw the first game back at the Sheffield Arena since the death of Adam Johnson at the venue, with special tributes for Nottingham's number 47 and a fan ovation in support of Sheffield's Canadian defenceman Matt Petgrave. We are not showing the exact moment, but in a game last month it was Petgrave's skate that cut Johnson's neck. On Tuesday, police investigating the incident arrested a man on suspicion of manslaughter, but did not name him. In a statement, South Yorkshire Police said, "We have been carrying out extensive inquiries to piece together the events which led to the loss of Adam in these unprecedented circumstances. We have been speaking to highly specialised experts in their field to assist our inquiries." It is very rare for police to lay criminal charges for sports incidents. In 2004, Canucks player Todd Bertuzzi pleaded guilty to assaulting Colorado's Steve Moore.
Marty going right after Brashear, and he slashed him right in the head.
4 years earlier, Marty McSorley of the Bruins was convicted of assaulting the Canucks' Donald Brashear.
They're going to have to determine, like in criminal law, that there is what we call the mens rea, or the intent of committing a crime, codified under their criminal code.
Police say the man arrested remains in custody. They have asked for the public to refrain from speculation on the case, which they say could hinder their investigation. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Still ahead, the bittersweet feelings of Canadians who've escaped Gaza. As the world watches what's unfolding in Gaza, there are some who are lucky enough to tell the story of what they endured there. Of the roughly 400 Canadians registered in Gaza, 356 have now escaped through the Rafah crossing into Egypt. And as Taria Isri reports, they're now safe in Canada.
Pearson Airport, the last leg of a journey this husband and wife feared they would not survive. After a month trapped in Gaza, Palestinian Canadians Amir and Suhar Youssef are safe in the arms of their son.
They actually tried for almost 2 weeks, back and forth, back and forth.
They crossed the Rafah border into Egypt, then flew straight home from Cairo. But there's no escaping their feelings of overwhelming loss.
My big brothers, they killed. They hit rock in my house and they killed my big brother.
Hani Al-Batniji also got out of Gaza. The Ottawa father traveled there to sell his family home when war broke out.
My feeling when I crossed the border, I feel that I am born again.
He spent weeks going house to house, evading airstrikes.
My brother is in a wheelchair. When we moved from first place to the second place, my nephew, he carried him in his back. And we're running barefoot, nothing, we have nothing there.
Wherever they went, they were surrounded by death.
Imagine every building get bombed, people underneath it. You smell it.
When Al-Batniji finally made it to the Rafah border, he says bombs were raining down.
The blood came out from my ear.
He's relieved to be reunited with his wife and 4 children, but is haunted by the hundreds of thousands of Gazans who can't leave, like his brother who does not have Canadian citizenship.
Really, when I left border, I left that, thanks God, I am out. But what about the others left behind?
Taria Isri, Global News, Ottawa.
Next, the final farewell for the Prime Minister's often problematic plane. Farewells can be sad, but not this one. A 30-year-old Air Force jet that has been Canada's VIP aircraft is getting a new role. It's carried royalty and prime ministers and has had its fair share of problems. Tonight, our chief political correspondent, David Aiken, who has logged many miles on that plane himself, takes a look back at its travels and troubles.
The first thing to know about Canadian Forces 01, seen here in its original color, is that it is no Air Force One. No, Canada's PM has been flying around in a very modest, modified Airbus. It was built in 1987, bought by Canada in 1992, used from Canadian Airlines, and then given a new paint job in 2013. The plane is so old, it still had ashtrays in the washrooms. Brian Mulroney spent $56 million to convert the plane, though he never flew in it. Jean Chrétien dubbed it a, quote, flying Taj Mahal. He took out the VIP items. He never used it either as PM.
4 times a year.
It was Paul Martin who first used the plane for official PM travel, and by then, all the seating was economy, except for the Spartan VIP cabin at the front. Here's Stephen Harper in that cabin with Chrétien, Kim Campbell, and Brian Mulroney on the way to Nelson Mandela's funeral. Where did all those VIPs sleep on the long flight to South Africa? Well, there's only one bed in the cabin, so at least 3 of those ex-PMs would have had to sit and sleep in economy seats, which only barely recline. There are no TVs at any passenger seat. Wi-Fi on board? Forget it. There's not even electrical outlets for passengers. It's been battered, beat up, and has often broken down, most recently stranding Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in India for an extra few days, while the Air Force waited for a part to fix it. And so we say goodbye to the old CF-01 and hello to the new CF-01. That's one of them behind me. It's an Airbus 2, an A330, bought used from Kuwaiti Airways. It was built in 2015. Modern enough, I'm told, that there will not be any ashtrays in the washroom. Donna.
Well, that's an important update. David Aiken at Ottawa's airport, thanks. That is Global National for this Tuesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is the unveiling of the new loonie at the Royal Canadian Mint in Winnipeg. It features the face of King Charles III, the first Canadian coin with His Majesty's image. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.